It's with great honor that I stand before you today to officially launch the sector working groups, which is a pivotal step in our national budget and planning process for the fiscal year 2026-2027 and the medium term. This initiative is integral to our broader strategic framework, which is aimed at ensuring economic sustainability of economic growth, social development, and effective public service delivery. I recently issued guidelines on the preparation of the financial year 2026-2027 and the medium-term budget in accordance with Article 220 of our Constitution and Section 35E and Section 36 of the Public Finance Management Act. It is further to these guidelines that we are here today to launch the 2026-27 and medium-term budget preparation process. So, ladies and gentlemen, the financial year 2026-27 and medium-term budget, which we are launching today, is being prepared within the context of a global economy that is facing significant challenges due to the following factors. One, rising trade barriers across the globe, financial tightening, and policy uncertainties which threaten growth prospects. Further, we are also faced with persistent risks which include trade policy escalations, cautious consumer and business behavior, intensification of geopolitical tensions, and sustained high inflation, potentially exceeding expectations. However, reversing trade restrictions early could stimulate growth and mitigate inflationary pressures. I am mentioning this because you have seen the unpredictability of the issues of tariffs between the two leading economies, which basically dictates where our economic growth would go. So on the global scene, as my peers has mentioned, the growth is expected to moderate at 3% in 2025 from 3.3% before slightly improving to 3.1% in 2026. In sub-Saharan Africa, again, that has been spoken to by my peers. I don't want to repeat. However, the growth outlook is supported by factors such as increased private consumption, ongoing public investment in infrastructure, and a gradual revival of the services sector, particularly tourism, in our economy. However, several risks could impede this growth trajectory, which include spillovers from global trade disruptions, declining external demand, volatility in commodity prices driven by geopolitical tensions, and limited fiscal capacity in many countries, which may lead to tighter financing conditions. Our economy is expected to recover in 2025. I think my peers spoke to last year's economic growth, which was lower at 4.7%. In the first quarter of this year, we have seen a rebound at 4.9%. We expect better performance later, although we had a challenge with the demonstrations and riots that took place end of June and beginning of July. But we expect a better performance in the last quarters of the year. And so our focus is to have a 5.3% economic growth, which is supported by strong agricultural and manufacturing sector. Our manufacturing sector has shown very clear signs of recovery, together with mining sector, which underperformed last year, mining and minerals. So we are also expecting a robust service industry, macroeconomic stability, ongoing public investment, and high business confidence. And the public investment is mostly in the construction sector and the road sector as well. However, Kenya's economic outlook still faces both external and domestic risks. Further, extreme weather may negatively impact agriculture, infrastructure, and food security. So the government is monitoring these risks closely and will therefore take necessary measures to safeguard macroeconomic stability. Our recent fiscal experiences have been instructive. One, the withdrawal of the 2024 Finance Bill last year compelled us to forego additional revenue measures, prompting implementation of austerity measures that prioritize essential social sectors such as education, health and social protection. In fact, last year was the most, I think, challenging year in the recent past, apart from the COVID years. Why? Because apart from losing revenue-raising measures which the government had factored in their plan, there were a lot of expenditure pressures that came from the health sector, where we adopted a new system of funding our healthcare program from October last year. And again, we also had a lot of challenges in the education sector. The collective bargaining agreements were, their implementation phase just began last year. So there were issues with COPET, NAT. We also had issues with the lecturer strikes. There were a lot of challenges, but I'm happy that we were able to surmount those challenges. So these measures, though challenging, reinforce the importance of financial judiciousness and resource economization in our governance framework. I therefore direct all MDS to ensure that the fiscal prudence and resource optimization we instituted are sustained and embedded in our culture of public service. So in the upcoming budget, will be anchored on in the fourth medium-term plan and aligned with the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. The strategic focus remains on fostering economic growth through the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, emphasizing on inclusive development. So in this regard, our focus will still remain the 5 pillars: agricultural transformation, MSMEs, housing and settlement, healthcare, and digital infrastructure, which includes creative economy investments. For our fiscal framework, we are structuring our fiscal framework around key targets, which include GDP of 5.3%, inflation maintained at the midpoint with plus or minus 2.5%. We are also anchoring our framework on the projection that we will realize 17.2% of GDP in terms of revenue collection. The other projection is that we will be able to maintain our expenditure below 22.2%, down from 22.7%. The other assumption is that our fiscal deficit will be reduced. Remember, in 2023-24, the fiscal deficit was 4.7. But then in 2024-25, the year that ended, that rose to 5.8. It may be looked at as a negative, but I will tell you that if you consider other factors, we are 4.7%, but with a carryover of 218 billion, which is about 1.3% of GDP. If you add, that is the carryover of what we were supposed to have supported or released exchequer to, which includes county governments, 31 billion, 26 billion that was supposed to go to pensions, and there was also CDF 13 billion, and MDAs unfunded exchequer requests of over 158 billion. If you add all that, that was 1.3% of GDP. If you added that to 4.7, you are at 6% of GDP. So in real terms, 2023-24, we should have closed by a budget deficit of 6% of GDP. I am happy to announce that the 2024-25, we closed the year with no carryovers. That the counties, we released all the exchequer requests to counties, including the arrears for 23-24. That we also released the exchequer requests for CDF, including the carryover of 13 billion. And we managed to settle all the pension requests that were processed. And we transferred exchequer requests to MDS almost in total. So then it means that our performance in 2024-25, in my view, in terms of budget deficit, it was better than 2023-24. So in recent financial planning reforms, innovative budgeting approaches have been adopted by the government to enhance fiscal management and strategic allocation of resources. One of these is the zero-based budgeting, which this financial year, we should not have any excuse why we cannot adopt zero-based budgeting. We piloted it in the last financial year. Now this financial year, the 2026-27, we must now actualize full implementation of zero-based budgeting. 2025-26, there were excuses. Now 26-27, there will be no excuses. So MDS should note that each of the program will compete for funding on an equal basis, forcing elimination of inefficiencies, duplications, and misallocation of resources. So this time there will be competition for resources. You must justify the resources that you are requesting from your sector working groups. In recognition that many challenges transcend sector boundaries, we will promote intersectoral collaboration to develop integrated solutions. We cannot afford to have different arms of government working in silos on the same problem. MDS are therefore required to identify and eliminate overlapping functions and propose joint programs that deliver greater impact at a lower cost. So we are not going to entertain any more overlapping functions between or among MDS. You must identify them and eliminate them for seamless and smooth implementation of our program. We are running one government, we are not running many governments. So we must avoid working in silos. Something that I need to emphasize on is public participation. It remains a cornerstone of our fiscal policy. We are committed to fostering a participatory approach, engaging stakeholders at all levels, and ensuring their inputs influence budget decisions. Treasury has already been leading from the front, and we are even going to do better in 2026-27 in terms of engaging Kenyans in budget process and budget implementation. And therefore, MDS, you have a responsibility to engage Kenyans. We must avoid the culture of thinking that we know what is good for Kenyans. We must allow Kenyans to participate in the budget-making process to decide where their resources should be allocated to. And so, all your requests will be subjected to that test, public participation. If you are not conducting public participation, I'm sorry, you may not get the resources that you are requesting from the National Treasury. It is essential to proactively identify and involve all key stakeholders, document their contributions, and clearly illustrate how their feedback has influenced the fiscal budget proposal. So all the proposals that you will be making, you have a responsibility to demonstrate how the feedback that you've got from Kenyans is influencing that budget proposal. This approach will ensure transparency. It will also enforce inclusivity and accountability, thereby strengthening the integrity of the decision-making process and fostering trust among all parties involved. I strongly encourage all accounting officers and sector working groups to view this process not merely as a procedural requirement, but as a fundamental aspect of sound governance. So before I conclude, I wanted to mention a few things. Then I will come back to make my conclusion. Listening to the PS, Chris Kipto, and PS Makoha, you will realize that we still have a long way to go to realize economic stability in this country. But I must also say that we have made some very good progress, that if we work together as a country, then we will realize economic stability in this country in the shortest time that we never imagined. We only need first to love our country and believe in our country. Sometimes when I listen to people make their contributions, I listen a lot also to TV talk shows. I also read newspaper and I see people's opinions. And I respect their opinion. But I think we also need to acknowledge and accept that a lot has happened even in the past 1 year. Let me just mention a few things. You'll remember that in 2022, we had inflation rates at unimaginable percentages, 9.6%. Yesterday, I saw someone write that inflation has gone down because we rebased our economy. I remember when we rebased our economy last, was several years back. And we haven't rebased our economy since that time. So these are likes for likes. So 9.6 has come down to 4.1. To me, clearly, that also reflects a reduction in cost of living. Because Chris gave you figures and analysis, and we have them. The cost of the basic commodities in 2023 and 2025. But even if you go back to 2022, it was even worse. So coming from 2022, end of 2022 to 2023, most of the basic commodities coming to 2025 their prices have gone down. From the basic, which is the maize flour, fuel, sugar, we have the data. Cost of living is not determined in political rallies. Cost of living will not be determined in churches. Cost of living is determined by real data collected, collated, and disseminated. And the data is there. If the cost of a 2-kilogram packet of maize flour was 218 in 2022, you cannot change it to 105. And if it is today 176 or 184, you cannot change it to 100. So these are real data. That is the cost of living. Cost of living is about cost of basic commodities. And the statistics are there. And I don't think there is anyone who can dispute that. And if you want to know that that is the reality, early 2023, when we really felt that the cost of basic commodities could not be afforded by ordinary people, we had sufurias on our heads. Today, how many people are in the streets with the sufurias on their heads? I don't see them. It means now the cost of what was being cooked by sufuria has gone down. So that is what I'm saying in a nutshell. There is another point that I want to mention. Allow me to just open the page where it is. The Kenya's economic outlook has been facing challenges mostly as a result of debt payment and debt servicing cost. That's a fact. You have been informed that now we are consuming about 48% of our ordinary revenue is going into servicing our debts in terms of interests. That is not sustainable. And we have recognized that as a risk area. However, I want to tell you that the government has also done a lot to make sure that we reduce the debt risks that was facing this country, or has been facing this country. Early last year, there was panic in our economy. The panic was that we were likely to default on paying our debt, meeting our debt obligation. There was a $2 billion Eurobond coming to maturity by June, and was supposed to be a bullet payment without any plan at all to pay it. And therefore there was a panic early in the year. The shilling lost ground, almost 165 to the dollar. But because of what the government did then, and what we have continued to do in terms of managing our liability and the debts, first, the shilling appreciated now to around 129.2 to the dollar, and has stayed around 128 to 130 for over 1 year. I hear some people say, is this real? The reality is, it is real. If you want to know that it is real, look at the forex reserves. You see, the shilling would lose ground when there is a threat to the reserves that we have in the country. And our reserves are at 5.2 months of import cover, up from 3.8 a year ago, and up from 2.3 months of import cover in 2022, when this administration is no longer new. But when this administration came into office, we had forex reserve to import cover of less than 3 months, which is the minimum requirement. Today, we have the 5.2. And that clearly demonstrates another reason why you are seeing us doing relatively well is because our exports. There is something that has happened in our exports, especially the coffee and horticulture. We are exporting more. Exports grew at 7.7%. That growth has narrowed the current account balance from 2.6% of GDP in 2022 to 1.3% now. That is halving the deficit, reducing the deficit by half. What has that done to us? Plus the diaspora remittances, and plus the fact that we were able early this year to foresee and project that there will be a Eurobond falling due for payment in 2027 May, that we must deal with it early so that we don't create another panic in the economy. We did that early. We have eliminated the risk. And we were very timely. In fact, most countries are wondering. When I meet with my colleagues, they are saying, how did you foresee this? The moment we went into the market and managed our 2027 liability, the markets have closed. If we delayed even for a month, we wouldn't have succeeded. So there is something positive, something progressive that is happening which cannot be done in the streets. It is done by clear and strategic thinking. And that is why S&P last Friday upgraded us. These are not people who just upgrade you because they like you. These are people who have considered all the factors, and they give reasons why they have upgraded Kenya from B- to B plain, if you want or if you like, with a positive outlook. Why did they do that? They have cited, first, improved current account balance, two, which is informed by exports and diaspora remittances, and three, they have said clearly and categorically that the government's decision early this year to liability manage the Eurobond that was falling due in 2027 has given Kenya a positive outlook. And can't you see that as a positive for this government? That is positive. And I want to repeat, that is something you don't do in political rallies. That is something you can never do in church. That is something that you do by pragmatically thinking and progressive mind to forecast and project what is likely to create a risk in the economy. Let me move quickly. So I have mentioned, now look at the lending rates, and I will tie the lending rates to the government borrowing rates. 1 year ago, the 91-day Treasury bill was trading at 16%. For government to access funds by issuance of 91-day Treasury bill, we had to offer 16% as interest. Last Thursday, it was at exactly 8%. 50% of what was there 1 year ago. And even the 182-day Treasury bill is at 8.07% last Thursday. This Thursday, it may even come down below 8%. Now, that has done something. One, it has also helped in reducing the lending rates to the private sector. In November 2024, the average rate was 17.2. July this year, it is at 15.3. And this, you can see, has effect in the private sector, where the credit uptake had declined to negative 2.9%. It has now gone to 3.3%, and we expect it to rise. Those are the economic fundamentals that would help the economy grow. It is not about fights in the streets. It's not about fights in funerals. It is about what you do to help the economy pick up.